Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the listeners. Welcome back into this new webinar series on vestibular disorders and management. Um, I am honored to welcome Dr. Sujit Kumar Sinha today with us. He is the Associate Professor and Head of the Department of Audiology at the Aish Institute at Mysore. His areas of interest are vestibular disorders, and he's published a lot of good scientific articles on vestibular disorders and its management. And he will talk about signs and symptoms of vestibular disorders and the importance of case history to us today. Dr. Sujit Sinha, welcome again. Over
Yeah,
to you.
yeah, thank you, Imran. Good afternoon, everyone. And today for this webinar, I am going to talk about sign and symptom of vestibular disorders and the importance of case history. Before I go into the sign and symptoms of vestibular disorder and importance of case history, uh, we have to understand certain basic things about the vestibular disorders. So I'll start my presentation. Yeah. So basically what happens is we have three systems, that is the visual system, the proprioceptive system and the vestibular system, which the three systems are responsible for maintaining our the maintaining of the orientation of the body in the space, wherein the visual system tells us about the image, that is what is happening around us to the image, whether it is moving, not moving, or what kind of image it is. The proprioceptive system tells us about the platform where we are standing, where we are sitting, what we are doing. It basically tells about the platform. A simple example I can tell that we all have used the treadmill in the gym, and when the treadmill starts, we sense that movement and we start moving in the opposite direction, and our movement is equal and opposite to the movement of the treadmill. This is what is done by the proprioceptive system. It is going to sense the platform, whether it is mobile, immobile, hard surface, soft surface, what kind of surface it is. The third is the vestibular system, which basically balances our body during the head movement. Okay, so these three systems are basically responsible for maintaining our orientation of the body in the space. Now the information from these three systems is sent to the central nervous system. The central nervous system integrates this information from the three system, and then it generates an output through the efferent motor system to the muscles of the limbs, trunk, neck, through the vestibulospinal system. Such as the same example which I will give, that is nothing but the treadmill. When it starts moving in one particular direction and we start moving in the other direction, and our speed is equal and opposite to the treadmill movement. So what is happening is, when the treadmill is moving, at that time our proprioceptive system senses that movement and sends the information to the brain, and then brain generates an output to our lower limbs, that is to the legs, and our legs start moving in the opposite direction with equal speed. Now there is another system which is very important, is the cerebellar system. Now cerebellar system is very important for any fine motor coordination or any fine motor activity. So if there is a person who says that I have imbalance issues, I have dizziness, I have giddiness, or they may have a different description of this could be because of a visual disorder or a problem in the visual system. This could be because of a problem in the proprioceptive system. This could be because of a problem in the vestibular system, or the pathway which is connecting the vestibular system to the central nervous system, or the central nervous system itself could be affected, or the pathway which is from the central nervous system to the limbs is affected, or there is a problem with the limbs, muscles, or the receptors, or there is a problem with the cerebellar structures. So an imbalance can happen because of problem in so many systems. Hence, and also what we have to understand is not only a physiological thing, but there is also a psychological factor. One of the condition which is known as, it's called as agoraphobia. Agoraphobia is a condition wherein the person gets vertigo attacks, or person get panic attack because of fear of public spaces, or if the person is going to a mall and person gets fainted over there, person feels imbalanced over there, or person is in some open space where he finds nobody, and these are a cause of a two psychological issues. So what we have to understand is that the imbalance can happen because of a visual system problem in the proprioceptive system, vestibular system, central nervous system, or the cerebellar system, or there could be a psychological factor. Hence, a person who reports to you with an imbalance issue, saying that I have giddiness, or I have imbalance, or I have dizziness, they may have different description. The first thing is that we should not jump into the vestibular system directly. We have to rule out several other problems before we jump into the vestibular system. And the vestibular diagnosis of the vestibular disorder is made by an exclusion criteria and not the inclusion criteria. So we say that, okay, there is no involvement of the visual system, there is no involvement of the proprioceptive system, central nervous system is fine, the cerebellar system is fine, and then nothing is there. Then we come to the vestibular system saying that, okay, fine, the vestibular system could be affected. So first thing is that we should not jump into the vestibular system at all. So coming to this is our vestibular system. This is the inner ear, which we can see, and what is important over here is the diameter of this the semicircular canal, which is only the length is 15 to 20 mm for the anterior canal, and the posterior canal, the length is around 18 to 22 mm, and the length of the lateral canal is 12 to 15 mm. But the diameter is only 0.8 mm. That means to say that it's such a narrow canals which is there. And now what we have to understand is this connection. That is nothing but the cochlear system and the vestibular system is connected through a small opening here, which is called as ductus reunions. And because it is connecting both the structure, they essentially share the same fluid, that is the endolymph. So first thing which we have to understand is, if there is any problem with the endolymph, then it will cause both cochlear as well as vestibular disorder, such as example Meniere's disease, labyrinthitis, etc., which have typically a problem with the endolymph. They cause both the cochlear as well as vestibular disorder. Looking into this picture is one of my favorite picture, which you can see, and this is how we can look the entire balance system which is there, and you can see that this is our inner ear, and from the inner ear, that is the vestibular system, there is an ipsilateral connection. There is a pure ipsilateral connection to the vestibular nuclei, and from the vestibular nuclei, the first connection which I describe is to this is called as the medulla and the medullary vomiting center. This is connected to the medullary vomiting center. Now from here, there is another connection which is connected to various centers in the cortical areas via your thalamic centers. There is another connection which is to the spinal cord, and this pathway is known as vestibulospinal tract. And there are two types of vestibulospinal tract: medial vestibulospinal tract and the lateral vestibulospinal tract. And what is important is, from the vestibulospinal tract, then we have vestibulospinal nerve, that is nothing but the spinal nerves which is going to our limbs. That means to say that these neurons which are coming out of the spinal cord are getting modulated by basically the vestibular inputs. Now there is another connection which is there. It's to the cerebellar system. So it is connected to the cerebellar structure, and back from the cerebellar structure there is another connection which is there to the vestibular nuclei. Another connection which is there, very important, is to the visual system, which constitute one important reflex which is called as VOR, or vestibulo-ocular reflex, and which will help us to stabilize the image when our head is moving. So now what happens is that, understand this. Now if there is a problem with the inner ear, or there is a problem with the vestibular system, the inputs to so many centers will reduce. Now once we come from here, now if the input to so many centers will reduce, what it is going to cause? Now because the input from the peripheral vestibular system, the input is reduced to the vestibular nuclei, the input to so many centers have reduced. Now from here, this pathway which is to the medullary vomiting center, what will happen is the input will reduce, and hence it is going to induce vomiting sensation. The input which has reduced to the vestibulo-ocular reflex system will lead to nystagmus and other visual disturbances. The input which has reduced from the vestibular nuclei to the spinal cord will result in a weakness to one side or weakness to the side which is affected, or the person will have swaying or the falling sensation towards one side or towards the side of the weakness. Also, because the input to the cortical system will reduce, there is going to be a mismatch of the information. That is, system might tell that the body has moved, but what will happen is, because there is a vestibular deficit, this will tell that the head has not moved, and hence there is going to be a mismatch of the information at the central nervous system, which will cause imbalance. So this is how this is the entire balance system which is there, and when the vestibular system is affected, the input to so many centers are going to reduce. Hence, a correct diagnosis of the balance disorder which is done, it's n number of evaluation which we have to do to rule out certain disease, and then we have to say that okay, whether they have a vestibular disorder or not. The first and foremost thing which is there, as an audiologist, we have to do the evaluation of the ear. That is, we have to do our routine Peyerton audiometry, emittance, OAE, BERA, and the vestibular evoked myogenic potentials, and see that whether there is any ear related problem or not. Then the second thing is, because as we see that the central nervous system is also involved in balancing, the cerebellar system is also involved in balancing, and so we require a neurological opinion, and also the lab test which is very important, that is routine blood evaluation, urine test, imaging, etc., which is all required for this one. Imaging will be only required when we are suspecting a case of a retrocochlear pathology or a vestibular sonoma. Okay, and the other thing which is which we have to understand is that we have to test the functional integrity of the visual system, the vestibular system, and the proprioceptive system. That is, the three systems needs to be normal, and also the central nervous system, peripheral.
Sir, your voice is not heard yet. I think, is there an audio issue at your end, sir? I cannot hear you, sir.
In every case, whoever used to visit our, hello,
now we can hear
can you hear me?
Yeah, there was a break.
Okay. So initially when hello,
we can hear you, sir, now.
Okay, fine.
Hello.
So
Yeah,
initially when I started with the vestibular evaluation, I used to do vestibular tests for each and every individual, but then I never used to get a positive finding. So I used to think that what I am doing is right or wrong. Then I found a group of people who were aged above 50, 60, 70 years, and then I thought that okay, let me just check their get their blood pressure checked or get their hypertension checked, and I found that lot of individuals, they were having a high blood pressure, or they were having a hypertension, and the giddiness in them was because of the increased blood pressure or because of the hypertension. And in those cases, if we keep doing the vestibular evaluation, it is of no use. And that is where I started to narrow down, saying that which case as an audiologist is mine and which case is not mine. And that is very important for us to understand, because if there is any problem with the inner ear part, then probably we have some solutions. But if there is a problem in the central system, as an audiologist, I believe that there is no solution with us, and these cases who have a central nervous system disorder should be sent to a neurologist for an opinion, rather than we holding them with us for the vestibular evaluation. So the case history is very important, and the objective of the case history in the vestibular problem is, first is identify if the balance problem really exists or not. As I said that there could be a balance problem because of a hypertension in a case who is 50 years old or 60 years old. So is it really coming from the inner ear, or is it from somewhere else? If there is a balance problem, then whether the inner ear is involved or whether the central nervous system is involved. If it is the peripheral problem, that is, if it is confined within the inner ear, whether it is right ear or whether it is left ear which is affected. Now, if the vestibular system is affected, then whether vestibulospinal reflexes are affected, vestibulo-ocular reflex are affected, cerebellar system is affected, central or the peripheral nervous system is affected, musculoskeletal system is affected, visual system is affected. That means say that we need to have the questions in the case history around this problem. And when I go on to my presentation, I'll put the questions or I'll put the descriptions around this only, which will tell us that okay, what to look for in a case when they have a peripheral disorder and what to look for when they have a central disorder. Some of the terminologies before I go on to the case history part or the sign and symptom part. Some of the terminologies which I want to just put in over here. First is vertigo, and vertigo is something which is nothing but it's a true spinning sensation, and this spinning sensation could be a subjective spinning sensation or could be an objective spinning sensation, wherein the person finds that the things around him or her is moving or they are moving around the things. The second thing is syncope. Syncope is nothing but it's a partial or complete loss of consciousness. And when the person says that yes, I had syncope or I had lost consciousness, then it opens a lot of opportunities for anybody. And syncope generally happens because of a temporary reduction in the blood flow, and that's where the cases who had, apart from vertigo, who says that I have become unconscious during the vertigo attack, that means to say that they do not have only inner ear problem, they might have something else also. So if a case says you that I fell down because of the vertigo or I was unconscious because of the vertigo, that means to say that the problem is not there in the inner ear, the problem is somewhere else. Nystagmus is nothing but it's an involuntary movement of the eyes where the person don't have a control on their eye movement and it's totally involuntary. There is another word which is frequently used, is called as dizziness. Now dizziness is basically a broad term which can include a true vertigo, that is nothing but the spinning sensation. It can include near syncope, that is nothing but a lightheadedness of the head. It is not exactly fainting down, but it's a lightheadedness of the head. It can include disequilibrium. Now what we have to understand is the vertigo can also cause disequilibrium. Now vertigo causing disequilibrium and person having a disequilibrium on its own are different. Disequilibrium here means that the person do not have a sensation that the things are moving around or he or she is moving around the things, or not as true spinning sensation, but rather than the person will tell you that if I want to stand, I feel that I'm going to fall down, so I don't want to stand. If I walk, I feel like I'm going to fall down to the right side or left side, so I don't want to stand and walk. So that is what is the disequilibrium. And anxiety disorder, that is nothing but there are a number of dizziness, such as I said, that agoraphobia, that is also a kind of a problem with the anxiety, this one. So there is a lot of psychological component over there and there is no organic pathology. So the dizziness can include all this. Dizziness is a broad term basically. Okay, there could be another thing wherein the person says you that there was a blackout. Okay, and this blackout could include three things which we have to
So your voice is interrupted again.
understand. One is a syncope, which I already described, that loss of consciousness. Second could be hello. Okay, so blackout could be because of an epilepsy also, or there are some psychogenic blackouts wherein because of some type of a stress in their life or anxiety, they have a blackout. So we have to be very careful when a person says or gives us a history of a blackout, loss of consciousness. We have to be very careful. Now let us look into some of the common vestibular disorder. Now some of the common vestibular disorder, here I have put in some of the disorder which is only confined to the inner ear or to the vestibular nerves. I'm not going to the central system. That's there. And Meniere's disease, we are aware that what is Meniere's disease. Benign paroxysmal positional vertigo, it is the vertigo with change in head positions. Vestibular neuritis, neuritis is nothing but it's an infection of the superior vestibular nerve. Labyrinthitis, it is the infection of the labyrinth. Vestibular sonoma, as we know. Vestibular migraine, migraine is vestibular migraine now, which is picking up in a lot of individuals, and these individuals have a history of migraine. And vestibular paroxysmia. Vestibular paroxysmia is nothing but wherein the blood artery which is supplied to the inner ear, it forms a loop around the vestibular nerves and the cochlear nerves, and because of which whenever there is a change in the head position, particularly when the head is going down, at that point of the time they experience imbalance or they experience vertigo attack. And another one is superior semicircular canal dehiscence syndrome. And this dehiscence syndrome is nothing but a part of the bone in the superior canal which is missing, and because of which these individuals will have sensitivity to the loud sound, or typically what we have learned that these individuals will have attulio phenomena. So when you give a loud sound, these individuals will have vertigo, and these individuals will have vestibular symptoms. Now in my clinic, if I look into that, what are the common cases which are coming to my clinic, they are basically, the first one is BPPV, the most prevalent disorder which I find in my clinic, followed by Meniere's disease, the second most which I get. Third one which I get is the cases with vestibular neuritis. Fourth one which I get is vestibular migraine, and fifth one is labyrinthitis. The other cases are pretty much less, and vestibular paroxysmia is very rare, and probably I have seen only 2 or 3 cases till date, and the canal dehiscence cases I have not seen even a single one. So these are not very frequent, but frequent are PPPV, Meniere's, neuritis, labyrinthitis, and migraine. Now coming to the first thing which is there is vertigo. Now as I said that the vertigo is nothing but it is a true spinning sensation. Now this true spinning sensation basically occurs because of unequal vestibular sensory input from the two labyrinths. Now that is nothing but understand this way is that now if there is a right Meniere's disease, nuclei is reduced on the right side, the left side remains normal but right side is reduced, and hence what happened that there is an asymmetry in the neuronal firing on the two sides. The vertigo typically occurs because of this inequality. So there could be a case of say that unilateral Meniere's disease, or there could be a case with bilateral Meniere's disease but asymmetrical, that is nothing but one ear is more affected compared to the other one. Okay, so vertigo most of the time, basically vertigo is most of the time coming because of the inner ear pathology. So once the case gives a history of saying that I have a vertigo or I have a true spinning sensation, then at least 60% or 50% I am confirmed that I am dealing a case with inner ear disorder. However, I am coming to that wherein the cases who have a stroke, they also have a vertigo spells. So there we have to be careful. That's why I said that 50% I'm confirmed that I'm dealing a case with the inner ear disorder. Okay, now this vertigo, what will happen is in cases with say that neuritis or labyrinthitis or any unilateral pathology except for Meniere's disease, will subside within 48 to 72 hours after it has started. So in a case of vestibular neuritis, when you see when the lesion occurs, at that point of the time they have very severe vertigo which will last for 48 to 72 hours, and after that what will happen is it will subside. After that it is going to subside. Then when they come to your clinic, they don't give you a history of vertigo anymore. They will tell you that I have imbalance, but I had an attack 1 week or 10 days back. So that is where what will happen is there is going to be a compensation phenomena, and vertigo is going to disappear over the period of time if it is coming because of the inner ear or the vestibular nerve. Okay, now peripheral vertigo accounts for over 90% of all the causes of vertigo. That's why I said that 50% I am confirmed that if it is a true spinning sensation, it is coming from the inner ear. 50%, rest 50% I look into the other things. Okay, so now the vertigo could also be a feature in various vestibular disorders such as vestibular neuritis, labyrinthitis, Meniere's disease, benign proximal positional vertigo, semicircular canal dehiscence syndrome, and it is also a feature of a stroke. Okay, so that's where we have to be very careful that which case we are dealing with. Are we dealing with a peripheral vestibular case, or are we dealing with something which has got a more central lesion? Okay, but if the patient is giving you a history of vertigo, 50% you can be sure that you are dealing with an inner ear patient. Okay, now there are other things which we have to understand. Now vertigo is the true spinning sensation. There is another thing which is postural instability. Postural instability is nothing but when the patient tells you that when I am standing, I feel that I am going to fall down towards one side, but there is no imbalance sensation. And this is postural instability is because of a bilateral vestibulopathy. That is nothing but both the labyrinths are not working, or certain neurological disorders such as polyneuropathy or cerebellar ataxia. This could cause postural instability. Lightheadedness, it is nothing but, as I said, that it is like a near syncope, and that could be because of a panic attack, which is also now called as persistent postural perceptual dizziness, or could be a condition like agoraphobia. Drop attack, it is typical of Meniere's disease, wherein the person suddenly faints down. So he falls down suddenly, but it also occurs in cases with vestibular paroxysmia, vestibular migraine, and also in brainstem stroke. So these are the cases wherein the person will have a sudden fall. Now, what is important is, as I said, that the vertigo is typically, which is telling me that it could be probably a case of inner ear disorder. Now, if we look into the vertigo, what we have to look for first is frequency. What is the frequency of vertigo? Now, single attack. So person says that I had an attack say 10 days, 15 days, 20 days back. Now I don't have any more attack of vertigo. I am fine. I am feeling little imbalanced. That could be because of acute peripheral vestibulopathy cases, such as you are dealing with either a vestibular neuritis cases or you are dealing with a labyrinthitis cases.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the frequency of vertigo. As I said, that if it is a single attack, vestibular neuritis or labyrinthitis, if the vertigo case of vestibular paroxysmia, it could be a case of perilymphatic fistula, it could be a case of vestibular migraine, it could be a case of vestibular migraine. And if the patient gives you a history of episodic vertigo, that is, now it is there and after that it is not there and after some time it comes, it could be a case of a Meniere's disease. Now, but here the chronic vertigo, wherein the person has very severe vertigo, will also give you a history of episodic vertigo, that I had an attack yesterday, today again I had an attack, day after tomorrow again I had an attack. This could be a case of you are dealing a case of the postural dizziness. And also what happens is, I don't check, they are there and they're there, that's it. So they are not fluctuating and they don't have this episodic vertigo. The second thing which you have to understand about the case is that, is there a significant past of the case? What is the significant past history? This tells you the case had probably you are dealing a case with BPPV, superior canal dehiscence syndrome, or you are dealing a case with perilymphatic fistula. If the case gives you a history of viral illness, then probably you are dealing a case with vestibular neuritis, or it could be a case of labyrinthitis. If the person gives you a history of that excessive drug uses, they causing bilateral vestibulopathy, be a case of basically. And also if there is an autoimmune disorders to the person, they are likely to have a bilateral vestibulopathy. So what is important is the past history which you have to take. That is, whether they had any problem like head trauma or any kind of illness, or whether they have taken any medicine, or whether they have any kind of other problem. That is very important. Now, what is the triggering factor? What is that causes the vertigo is very important. First is bending down, lying down, rolling in the bed and looking up. If this is causing the vertigo, probably you are dealing with a case who have benign proximal positional vertigo. Now, if you have a case where the case says that if during the rapid head movements only I am having dizziness, then you are dealing with the case of unilateral or bilateral labyrinthine dysfunction. If a case tells you that during the Valsalva maneuver, coughing or loud sound, if there is a vertigo, then probably we are dealing a case with perilymphatic fistula or superior canal dehiscence syndrome. Okay, and if the case tells you that they have problem in the open spaces, or they have problem in the shopping malls, they feel dizzy, then probably you are dealing a case with a postural vertigo. And the acute period of stress will trigger Meniere's disease. So they tell you that I was stressed up and I am not I did not sleep for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, then probably you are dealing a case with a Meniere's disease also, and you are also dealing a case with a vestibular migraine also. Okay, in the vestibular paroxysmia also, these cases will tell you or give you a history of vertigo attack during the change in head position. Now, if the person gives you a history of prolonged sleep disturbances, which is because of the stress induced, or because of they consume alcohol, or they have suddenly stopped consuming alcohol and the vertigo is increasing, this you are dealing a case with vestibular migraine. Now, visual surrounding causing the problem, that is they cannot tolerate the bright light, they cannot tolerate the sunlight, then you are probably dealing a case with vestibular migraine. Now, vestibular neuritis what will happen is there is no triggering factor in vestibular neuritis. There is nothing that is causing vertigo, but the vestibular neuritis will usually start with a viral infections or some kind of upper respiratory tract infection where it is going to start. Okay, now the postural instability, if the person tells you that daytime I am fine, but what happens is as it becomes evening, I feel that I am imbalanced, I am about to fall this side or that side, you are dealing with a case who is having a peripheral vestibular disorder. Okay, and some vertigo attacks will occur completely spontaneously. That means say that they do not have triggering factor. I am watching the television and I am having a vertigo. Okay, so this could be a case of a vestibular migraine, or it could be a case with a stroke also. Now, the other thing which you have to understand in a case with vestibular disorder is the ear related problem. As I said that the ear is connected to the vestibular system, and hence ear becomes very important. So if the case gives you a history of sudden hearing loss accompanied by a single attack of vertigo, that is suggesting a labyrinthine deficiency. Also, what you have to look into that, whether they have a presence of tinnitus, they have a presence of hearing loss, they have a presence of fullness of the ear. Such as, I'll give you a simple example that the vestibular neuritis and labyrinthitis have almost the same feature, but they are differentiated based only upon the cochlear feature. That is nothing but the labyrinthitis have a hearing loss which is present, or they have tinnitus which is present, but neuritis patients do not have tinnitus or they do not have a hearing loss. Okay, now the tumors of the internal auditory canal, so if they have a vestibular sonoma, basically they will have tinnitus, they will have dizziness, and they will have hearing loss in the high frequency. That is where your ear related problem becomes very important for you to know. Okay, so these are the signs and symptoms. So they will have hearing loss, they may have hearing loss, they may not have hearing loss. The other important part which we have to understand in the vertigo patient is the neurology. So we have to look for some amount of sign and symptoms related to the central nervous system, or what we call as some soft neurological sign which we have to learn to identify, saying that whether they have some amount of soft neurological sign, then what will happen is these cases should be sent for a neurological opinion if you find that they have a neurological issues. The other thing which is very important is the evolution of the vertigo, that is how the vertigo has evolved over the period of time. Okay, now what is happening is how we are differentiating the other, this one is vestibular neuritis is typically very disturbing in the early phases. When it starts, actually the patient is bedridden, they cannot even get up from the bed, such is the intensity of the vertigo. But what will happen is after 2 to 3 days they become fine. Okay, so there is a decrement in the vertigo, whereas the Meniere's disease is always characterized by a sudden attack, and the patient will not be knowing that when the attack is going to occur. It just occurs like, I mean, spontaneously. In few cases with Meniere's disease, they might have an aura. They will exactly know that in next half an hour they are going to get vertigo. Okay, and all the other forms of vertigo except for neuritis and Meniere's disease, they do not fluctuate, or they are like progressive, or they are going to increase, but it is not going to fluctuate. The other thing which is very important in understanding the vertigo is the duration of the vertigo, that if it came, how much time it was there. So first is that Meniere's disease cannot last seconds to a few minutes. Okay, that is nothing but the Meniere's disease will always last for few minutes. So they will tell you that the vertigo was there for 5 minutes, the vertigo was there for 10 minutes, whereas the BPPV will be there maximum for 30 seconds, maximum for 30 seconds. So these cases will tell you that I had an attack 2 seconds, 5 seconds, and it went off. Okay. Now a single attack lasting days can point to, that is nothing but the attack has come now and entire day the person has a vertigo. It can indicate to labyrinthitis, it can indicate to vestibular neuritis. Okay. And also, okay, and also that the episodic vertigo could be BPPV, vestibular migraine, vestibular paroxysmia, paralymphatic fistula. This will all depend upon this one that is there. And vestibular migraine is one pathology which can last for 5 minutes to 72 hours in a row. So that is where the duration becomes very important. We have to understand Meniere's disease will last for few minutes to half an hour maximum. The BPPV will last for maximum 20 to 30 seconds. And a single attack which is going on for 2 to 3 days, it's typical of labyrinthitis or typical of neuritis. Okay. And vestibular migraine will start somewhere from 5 minutes and it will go for 2 to 3 days continuously. Now if we look into all this, okay, fine. So the first question should always be like, what are the symptoms, whether they have vertigo, whether they have imbalance, or whether they have some other signs that we have to track in. Okay. Now the second question is, how often does it happen? That is the frequency of the vertigo. So whether it is once it came, after that it is not there, or whether it is occurring daily, or whether it is happening weekly, monthly, irregular, continuously, and this will give you a lot of information, such as, for example, if the case tells you that I had an attack 10 days back, now it is not there, it could be a case of neuritis or labyrinthitis. If somebody tells you that every morning I get up and every morning I'm having vertigo, probably you are dealing a case with BPPV. If there is an episodic vertigo, that is today it is there and after 2 months again it is there, probably you are dealing with a case with Meniere's disease. So that is where the frequency is important. Since when the vertigo is there, now you have to look into the past history, whether they had any illness, whether they had any trauma to the head, or whether they had something else, medical conditions after which the vertigo is there. This is very important. The other thing which we have to understand is details of the aggravating factors. What is that is aggravating it, whether the change in head position is aggravating it or whether the stress is aggravating it. That is very important. If the change in head position is aggravating the condition, probably you are dealing a case with BPPV or you are dealing a case with vestibular paroxysmia. And if it is spontaneously which is coming and there is no aggravating factors to it, you are dealing with other disorders. Then the other thing which is important in the case history is ask the otological issues. Now these otological issues will tell you that whether the problem is there because of the inner ear or not. That's where we need to tap that whether they have a hearing loss, whether they have tinnitus. Also check for a soft neurological signs if you can check it. If you cannot, then get a neurological opinion, that is must for these cases. And look for the progress of the vertigo, how the vertigo has progressed, whether it was more earlier, now it has reduced, or whether it is in the episode and between the episode it is nothing is there. Then it will also give you information about the different disorders. Now duration of the each episode of the vertigo, as I said that very important is because the Meniere's disease will last for few minutes to half an hour, BPPV will last for only few seconds, and that is where the duration is very important for this one. Now this is what is there is our vestibulogram, what we call it as, and I have just put in the first page of this vestibulogram. And here you can see that this is basically our case history format. And what is important here that you can see is description of the first attack. The person with a vestibular disorder, we can forget the second attack, can forget the third attack, but the person never forgets the first attack. So you ask the first question to the client should be that you ask to describe him or her the first attack. What was the first attack like? Whether it was a vertigo, whether it was a spinning sensation, whether they had fainted on or whatever. Let them describe the first attack. The patient is going to give you a good history of his or her first attack. Then You look for whether they had a giddiness, spinning, blackout, uncertainty, unconsciousness, falling, swaying, imbalance. And then this second question, you can see that duration of one episode lasted for few seconds, few minutes, few hours or few days. A frequency of episode, whether it is every day, once in 15 days, once in 3 months, once in a year, or how it is. Duration of the problem, since when it is. Nature of the problem, it was sudden, gradual, static, progressive. The triggering mechanism which you have to give a particular attention, it is motion sickness, lack of sleep, intolerance to the sound, etc. Vegetative symptoms, whether they had a nausea, vomiting sensation, sweating, increase in heart rate, these are the common symptoms which will be there. Ear related problems such as ear pain, ear discharge, blocking sensation, tinnitus, hearing loss, such as, for example, if the person tells you that I had a chronic ear discharge in my childhood, and now also say that since few days I had some amount of ear discharge, probably you are dealing a case with a labyrinthitis. Now history, sports injury, vehicle acceleration, accident, these are particularly important because this might give you a history of BPPV and perilymphatic fistula or superior canal dehiscence syndrome. So the history, this is our first page which we have put in, and this is one page which I have taken from an article which is called as So Stoned. Now you can see that acronym here itself. S is for symptoms, O is for often, since, trigger, pathology, neurology, evaluation, and duration. So if you just bifurcate here, it becomes So Stoned. And this is a very good article in the recent time probably I have read in. And as you can see that they have given like acute vertigo could be caused because of vestibular neuritis or labyrinthitis, and the symptom could be vertigo, nausea, postural instability. Often only once it is coming. Since when? Since it is because of infection, certain infection, upper respiratory tract infection. And what is the trigger is the spontaneous head movement. Pathology, none, there is no hearing loss, but if there is a case of labyrinthitis, there could be a hearing loss. Neurology, none, that is no neurological dysfunction in this case. And evaluation, that is recovery over days to weeks, that is 48 to 72 hours it will start to recover. Duration, vertigo will last for some time, that is 2 to 3 days in cases with the neuritis or the labyrinthitis. This is a good article and this is a good summary of everything. Now here, acute vertigo can also occur in the stroke or the cerebellar disease or the brainstem, which you can see here. And the symptoms are vertigo, dizziness, nausea, typical of a vestibular disorder. But we need to differentiate it from a neuritis or a labyrinthitis. So we'll go on to these parameters and we see often only once. This is sudden onset, that is a stroke is a sudden onset. Okay, and trigger is nothing, it is a spontaneous again, and this is a very rare condition. And neurology, they will have a cerebellar symptoms such as ataxia, dysdiadochokinesia, dysarthria, prominent headache, skew deviations. These are the soft neurological signs which will be present in these cases with the stroke. So here the primary how we can differentiate these cases, vestibular neuritis and vertigo because of a stroke, based on all these symptoms. That is, the cases with neuritis will not have any neurological dysfunction, whereas the cases who have a vestibular neuritis will not have any dysfunction, whereas a stroke will have always a neurological sign and symptoms. Okay, so this is how we need to differentiate based on the different this one, and this is how your case history should be, that it should tap onto all these things, so that finally you are coming to a conclusion saying that probably you are dealing with a peripheral case, or whether you are dealing with a central case, or whether you are dealing with BPPV, or whether you are dealing with Meniere's disease. So as you can see here, I'll just put another example such as benign the BPPV and Meniere's disease. So as we can say that symptom is vertigo, postural instability in the BPPV, and the symptom is vertigo, postural instability, nausea in Meniere's disease. Now, how often it occurs? Vertigo, that is daily in the BPPV, and vertigo occurs in intervals from weeks to month in the Meniere's disease. Okay, since when? Then BPPV will give you a history of head trauma, or it could be an idiopathic case, or it could be a case of labyrinthitis. And Meniere's disease, it's from month, years, the duration is very variable. Triggering factor in the BPPV, change in head position, whereas the triggering factor in Meniere's disease is the stress. Okay, And whereas otology in BPPV, there may not be a hearing loss, and you know that in Meniere's disease there is going to be a low frequency hearing loss, there is going to be a tinnitus, there is going to be a oral fullness, there is going to be a hyperacusis. No neurological sign in either BPPV or Meniere's disease. And what will happen is the vertigo in BPPV will be constant from day to weeks. That is, every day it is going to be the same. Whereas Meniere's disease will fluctuate in frequency and intensity. In Meniere's disease, what we have to understand is between the first attack and the second attack, there will be a gap. Whereas second attack onwards, it will become more continuous. That is nothing but every week or every 10 days or every 15 days, the vertigo in Meniere's disease is going to come after the second this one. And as you can see, the duration, the BPPV lasts only for few seconds. Meniere's disease can last for half an hour also. So that is where you need to differentiate this pathology, and this is a beautiful summary of this one. And your case history probably should be directed to this also, so that you can separate your diagnosis and you can come to this one. So that's where you have these targeted questions. If there is a question, I'll take up for this, and I'm sorry for all the interruption. The internet is fluctuating here. Hello, Imran.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sujit. That was an excellent overview of signs and symptoms of vestibular disorders. And I think that the audience has got a lot of things to think about and understand. The session is now open for questions. Please feel free to type in your questions or ask your questions. If you raise your hand as well, if you prefer to ask your question verbally, then we can just switch on your microphone. Thank you so much, Dr. Sujit, once again. That was excellent.
Thank you. And sorry for all these interruptions. Suddenly the internet fluctuated in between.
No, but I think it was still very good, and I think it was very comprehensive overview.
Meenakshi Gupta has one question. Yeah, I'm just unmuting her mic. She can ask. She wants to ask the question.
Yes, sure.
Meenakshi, you're there? You can hear me? You can use your mic
Yes,
and answer.
Yeah, thank you, Srividya. Thank you, Sujit, for the nice presentation. I have quite a few questions, but I'll see if we have time for them. So the first one that I want to ask, which I've always tried to look for an answer, but I couldn't get much information. Maybe I haven't done enough reading. So the question is, based on the symptoms of the patient, how would you discriminate? How would you differentiate whether it's a unilateral vestibular weakness or bilateral vestibular weakness?
Unilateral or the bilateral vestibular weakness. The first thing is that unilateral, if it is totally unilateral cases, they will have a vertigo. Let me understand. If I'm just thinking that the pathology is concentrated in the inner ear, I'm not going beyond that. So I'm just talking
I'm only asking about the peripheral
yes.
pathology. Yes.
So in the unilateral cases, there will be a true vertigo or there will be a true spinning sensation, number one. Now, if you are dealing with a case of bilateral disease, then in the bilateral symmetrical cases, if you assume that both of them had 50% of damage, both the sides, then they will not have a vertigo. They will have more of an imbalance. So they will have like a falling sensation to either side, and they will have more of an imbalance, not a true vertigo. Number one. Number two, what will happen is these bilateral vestibulopathy cases wherein they have a bilateral disorder, they might have an oscillopsia. That is nothing but the perception of the visual field. It's something like they find that it is moving with their body movement. That is another thing which to tap in. And if it is a bilateral asymmetrical cases, then again they will have a vertigo. That is again a feature. That is where we need to be more cautious that whether we are dealing with unilateral cases or whether we are dealing with the bilateral asymmetrical cases. And again, if it is a true unilateral disorder, I prefer to go ahead with some of the subjective tests such as Romberg or the Fukuda stepping test, and then I look into that whether they have a true unilateral disorders or not. And also, if you want to look for the nystagmus in the bilateral cases, if they have a symmetrical disorder, the nystagmus may not be present, wherein the unilateral cases you have the nystagmus always present. You put the VNG goggles and cover their eyes, you will find the nystagmus to be present. So that is how I separate based on a certain question on the sign and symptoms, and then I do some subjective test, and then I try to see that whether it is unilateral or a bilateral cases.
Thank you. And so from the same question again, so if a patient says that they don't have vertigo, but they always feel that they are swaying while walking, or they feel as if they're going to fall on one side, and most of them say that I always feel I'm going to fall on the left side, is that an indication towards the weaker vestibular system, or that has low, what does it indicate to me as a
Yeah,
clinician?
as a clinician, what does it indicate is if there is the person gives you a definite history that I am imbalanced, I am swaying, or I don't have vertigo, probably you are dealing a case with a bilateral vestibulopathy. That is one thing. Or probably you are dealing a case with the central nervous system disorders also, wherein they have imbalance, but imbalance, the source is somewhere else, and that is where they have more of imbalance. That is where when I look a case of more of imbalance, I get a neurological opinion first, saying that get the neurological testing done, and then I go ahead with the vestibular testing. That is how I look at these cases. Else, these cases who have a imbalance, I do not start with the vestibular evaluation with them. I send them for a neurological opinion. Once I get a clarification from there, and then only I go ahead with the vestibular testing. So that is how I look for. And as a clinician, what I understand is if swaying is consistent towards one side, whether person is walking 10 times or 15 times or 20 times, probably the person that the side where he or she is swaying is probably weaker. That's only
Yeah,
they are
that
swaying to
was
that particular side.
okay. So that's what it would indicate. Now, another very important question that I come across very frequently during the clinical practice. So, at what, like most of the patients who are elderly, they would have high blood pressure, and they are referred by their doctors that they've got dizziness and stuff. Can you check them, and can you assess whether they need a vestibular assessment?
Meenakshi,
So, as you discussed, can you hear me? Hello,
I missed your question actually.
can you hear me?
Can you
Okay.
hear me?
So the question is,
Yeah, I
at
can
the
hear you.
yes, I can hear you. I can hear you. Yes.
Hmm.
Okay. So
Yeah, please go
if
ahead.
we see a patient who has got high blood pressure, but the blood pressure is under control with the medications, and they still complain of dizziness, mostly postural or when turning on bed and stuff, would you go ahead with vestibular assessment, or what would be your approach in that kind of situation?
Um, uh, no, Meenakshi, the thing is that what happens is there could be a case of orthostatic hypotension, which is, I mean, probably more common in cases with presbyopia or the older individuals, wherein you find that with the change in head position, even though the blood pressure is down, they do have a kind of giddiness or vertigo when you are evaluating them. Okay, and one of the differentiating feature which I do is I just try to do a kind of a Dix-Hallpike test, wherein I look for whether while getting up, basically while getting up, these cases will present with a feature of a vertigo only while getting up, not when I make them lie down or when I turn them to the right side or the left side in the supine roll test, but they will more complain of vertigo when I am making them sit up when I am doing the Dix-Hallpike test. So these cases are typically orthostatic hypotension cases, and these orthostatic hypotension cases, I don't go for vestibular evaluation as such unless and until I suspect something. I refer them back to the physician only, or I refer them back to an ENT doctor, and I get their opinions done, because initially we evaluated lot of these cases, and lot of these cases had a miss. That is nothing but we just kept doing the vestibular evaluation and we did not find anything over there, and that is where we have started to this one doing that which case I should evaluate and which case I should not evaluate.
Okay, so you would wait for the other specialists to rule out the other causes, and that's when you would start your vestibular assessment in that kind of
Yes,
patient?
yes. I do not want to do vestibular evaluation just like that for each and everything. Unless and until because we have the ENT set up at the institute only, so the ENT general information we get it there itself, that whether they have something or they don't have something. But if I suspect anything, any kind of a neurological this one, I send the case for a neurological evaluation, and unless and until I get a neurological clearance, I do not evaluate those cases at all. Because as an audiologist, what I understand is, if there is a dysfunction like neuritis or labyrinthitis, I can do VRT for them and they will improve over the period of time. But what if there is some case who has a central nervous system disorder or who has a cerebellar disorder or something else? As an audiologist, I know that I cannot manage those cases. So at least they will reach to a professional wherein they will look after those cases and they will evaluate those cases, and that will be a better treatment for them. So unless and until I get an opinion, I do not touch each and every cases.
What if the patient has been assessed by all the specialists, there's no central lesion, everything is fine, and they're still experiencing dizziness, and the
Then
doctor sends
yes,
them to you? Is there
then I
a,
will evaluate.
would the
Yeah.
management change depending upon what
Uh,
we get,
no,
what diagnosis we get?
the management will not change. To be very frank, I'm telling you, because we are not doing any medical management, so that management will change from one case to
I
the
mean
other
in
case.
terms of
I mean,
vestibular rehabilitation.
no, except for Meniere's disease, probably no. Vestibular neuritis, labyrinthitis, if I'm dealing with the management is same VRT. If I'm dealing with the BPPV case, the management is the Maneuver. Meniere's disease, I do not know how to manage that. I have no answer for this because the VRT is not at all useful for them. So I have no answer for Meniere's disease. But neuritis, labyrinthitis typically, or any other unilateral diseases, I go for VRT and they respond well. And BPPV, they will become all fine with maneuvers. The other cases like Meniere's disease, I seriously do not know, because VRT does not help them out. So it depends upon one diagnosis to the other diagnosis. But lastly, I want to make a diagnosis saying that what is the problem.
And in vestibular neuritis patients, at what stage would you recommend them the vestibular rehabilitation? Would you wait for few weeks before that's
Actually,
recommended, or?
yeah, we do not have a medical setup, so I personally have not got to see these cases in the acute phases, very acute phases, on the very first day or the second day. Few of them I have seen, but I have gone to a medical hospital and waited there for some times to see these cases. Otherwise, whenever they report to me, they will report typically after 15 days or 20 days after the onset of the lesion, and probably by that time the vertigo would have subsided and they will have a little imbalance issues, and at that point of the time I'll be doing the VRT with them.
So it's safe to recommend it after you have recommended it within 2 to 3 weeks after the episode
2 to 3
happened.
weeks is fine.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 to 3
It's
weeks
fine.
is
Okay.
fine to have, because once they are discharged from the hospital, you will have the summary report whether what kind of problem they had, and what is the other report which is there. And typically, I think we will have all the blood evaluations done, and we will also have a scan report from the hospital. So that gives us pretty much a good idea whether they have any other problem or they have a typical vestibular neuritis. And 2 to 3 weeks, it's fine to go ahead with the VRT. There is no problem.
Okay, thank you, Sujit. I have more questions, but I think I'll let it go and let other people ask you the questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Sujit. We have one question. Is there any unique complaint or symptom in vestibular schwannomas?
Vestibular schwannoma typically will start with tinnitus and high frequency hearing loss, which we can see, and there is no other typical this one which will be there. But for I don't know, I mean this is probably one of the symptoms which I find is when they rub their finger against the concha, they find no sensation over there. Probably this is one of the sign which is there in the cases with vestibular schwannoma. Otherwise, there is nothing else which we can find except for tinnitus, and when I evaluate, I find a high frequency hearing loss with abnormal ABR in my audiological testing. And that is where when I find something abnormal with the ABR, I refer them for a neurological evaluation again for the confirmation of the retrocochlear pathology over there or a tumor over there.
Okay, this question is by Mr. Suman. He has few more questions. I have unmuted him. Can Suman speak? Okay. Anyway, he says in any other particular symptom, as we know, it is a central compensation happens within days. So, can you have any unique symptom where we can catch them?
The vestibular sonoma.
Correct.
Vestibular sonoma typically, unless and until I do an audiological evaluation, other sign and symptoms are same as any other vestibular disorder. But when I do the evaluation, audiological evaluation, then only I get to understand whether this is a case of a retrocochlear pathology or not.
Okay. Okay, I think that answers Suman. We have a question from Chandan Saha. He says, in case of unilateral vestibular lesion, should we not start facilitating the possible?
Should we not start facilitating the?
Facilitating, yeah, the compensation as soon as possible.
Yeah, we have to start as soon as possible. That is a good thing. And basically what happens is, any vestibular suppressant which is being given, I feel that should not be given for more than 5 days, such as your drugs like Vertine or Betavert or anything should not be given for more than 5 days at a go. I mean, depending upon that, anyway, that the medical professionals will decide. But what I understand is this. And
Sir,
second thing, what is, yeah, I'm coming to the compensation.
He's asking through visual stimulation, can a compensation be given?
Yeah, we can start with the compensation. The problem, what happens is, the cases who are typical cases of neuritis and the labyrinthitis, because they have such a severe attack of vertigo in the beginning stage that they would never want to visit an audiologist. And also, I don't want them to visit us, because initially it definitely requires a medical attention first. So when they go for a medical evaluation, at least by the time they come, it becomes like 1 week or 10 days by the time they reach to us. And as soon as they reach to us, we start with the VRT. So that acute, I mean, the phase of hospitalization is very important for these cases.
Okay.
And like cases with BPPV, I evaluate on the same day, I do the maneuver on the same day, and the next day pretty much they are fine. That way. So it all depends upon the kind of pathology which they have.
Okay. There's one more question. What is the incidence of vertigo and SSD cases in young adults?
SSCD, it's actually very rare condition. I mean, to be very frank, I mean, in last 7 or 8 years, I have not seen even a single case of SCD. So it's very rare conditions probably to watch for. So I seriously do not know what is the incidence outside abroad, but in my clinic, I have not seen even a single case of SCD.
Okay. As of now, I have only so many questions here.
There's
can
one
I
more
ask the panelists
question.
to participate? Yeah.
Yes.
Say.
This is from Mrityunjay Randir. He is asking, what is the typical history of drug-induced vertigo? What are the causative drugs?
Any drug which is ototoxic is vestibulotoxic too. Okay, so if he has or she has taken anything which is ototoxic in nature, such as any mycin group, that will definitely cause a vestibulotoxicity along with the ototoxicity. It is not going to stay at the ear, it is also going to damage the vestibular system also. Such as, I'll just give an example. The patient who have a typical history of tuberculosis, basically the tuberculosis is a gram-negative infection. What is known as in medical terms is it's a gram-negative infection, and these gram-negative infections can be only controlled with the penicillin. That is nothing but all this mycin group only. And when they are put on mycin, what is happening is it is damaging the vestibular structures. also the cochlear structures. And also this mycin group basically damages the kidney. It causes a renal failure. And to prevent the renal failure, then the loop diuretics is being given to these patients to prevent the renal failure. And loop diuretics is another case of ototoxicity and vestibular toxicity. So any drug which is causing ototoxicity is vestibular toxicity, number one. Number two, because what will happen is in these cases with ototoxicity, the medication will be given for a prolonged time, and it will cause a bilateral vestibulopathy. It will not cause unilateral disorder, it will cause a bilateral vestibulopathy. So they will have a more continuous character. That means say that they might show with imbalance, they will not show with a true vertigo.
There's another question, sir, from Meenakshi Gupta. She asks, which autoimmune disorder causes bilateral vestibulopathy?
Any autoimmune disorder which is there and particularly related to the vascular system will cause a bilateral vestibulopathy, such as, for example, cases with multiple sclerosis will also cause a bilateral vestibulopathy of the neurons. That means say that it will damage the neurons of the both the side of the vestibular system, and also it will damage the neurons of the cochlear system. That is, it will cause a complete neuropathy of the vestibular system plus auditory system also. So cases like multiple sclerosis can have a bilateral vestibulopathy.
So there is a couple of questions I can see, but what I will do is I'll summarize the thing that they want to ask is basically about triaging for cases with vestibular or dizziness problems. What are your opinions in terms of triaging? Like somebody who's got a giddiness, dizziness, vertigo, do you think they should come to the audiologist first, or do you recommend them to go to the physician, then the ENT, then come to the audiologist, so that the whole thing is down to peripheral?
No, the thing is that to be very frank, if you ask me what I want to rule out any other disorder before I go ahead with the VRT. That is the primary thing, because what we have to understand is, as we saw, that the imbalance, the vertigo, the dizziness can be caused because of n number of problems in the peripheral as well as central system. So I should not be harming any patient if they have a central vestibular or central system problems. Then because what will happen is, at times you will find that the vertigo which is happening because of the central system. Now suppose, for example, I did a Dixhall practice just to rule out a positional vertigo, whether it is a positional vertigo or not. Now what will happen is, if it is a positional vertigo from the peripheral system, it might get suppressed within 20 seconds or 30 seconds. But it is something from the central nervous system, it might not get suppressed for hours together. So now I do not know hours together how the patient is going to tolerate that vertigo or what I am going to do. So I have no idea. So that's where I would like to first get in. I will take the case history, that is for sure. I'll take the case history, but I will, before I will do a VRT or before I do a vestibular evaluation, I will definitely take an opinion from an ENT and take an opinion from the neurologist. That is for sure.
So what I understand, sir, you're saying is that in the triaging process, an audiologist should be well equipped to also understand central signs and soft neurological signs, so that
Yes,
he
exactly.
or she can do whatever is necessary, and proper referral is important rather than just jumping onto tests and management.
Online also, no problem.
She asks, can we get a little more information on pathophysiology of vestibular paroxysmia? Can you please go through the differentiating symptoms of both again?
Vestibular paroxysmia and BPPV.
Yeah.
I think they are closely connected in terms of signs and symptoms. So that's probably what she's asking.
They are connected well within sign and symptoms, wherein what we have to understand, few things which is we have to understand. Number one, when we are dealing with a case with BPPV, benign proximal positional vertigo, the BPPV can occur in the anterior canal, the posterior canal, and the lateral canal, wherein it occurs most often in the posterior canal compared to the lateral canal or the anterior canal. Now, what is happening is, if we understand a little anatomy of this, each canal is sensitive in their own plane. That means say that the lateral canal is sensitive only in the lateral plane. So if there is a dysfunction of the lateral canal, the nystagmus will be only there in the lateral plane, and if the dysfunction or the BPPV is there in the vertical canal, anterior or the posterior, the nystagmus will be there only in the vertical plane. That is one thing. Whereas what will happen in cases with vestibular paroxysmia is it will not follow that canal pattern. The nystagmus pattern will not be canal specific in cases with vestibular paroxysmia, number one. Number two, in the BPPV, it is caused because of dislodging of the otocornea from the utricle, wherein this vestibular paroxysmia cases, it is caused because of the artery which is supplied to the inner ear. It's forming a loop around the vestibular nerves and the cochlear nerves. So what will happen is basically they are causing a compression, and when the head goes down at that point of the time, because the blood flow increases to the head, at that point of the time the vertigo will occur. This is the second thing. One, now benign proximal positional vertigo, it will occur during a certain period. That is nothing but morning the severity of the vertigo will be more in cases with BPPV, wherein vestibular paroxysmia, regardless of whenever it occurs, whether it occurs in the morning or whether it is occurring in the evening, the severity is going to be same. It will be same. Now what will happen is that the spontaneous change in the head position, it will cause a vestibular paroxysmia, I mean vertigo in the vestibular paroxysmia, whereas in the BPPV only the head moves in certain position, it will cause vertigo. Such as, for example, if there is a posterior canal vertigo, then if the person is wanting to look up or look down, at that point of the time only they will have vertigo. But if they move their head in left and right side, they will not have the vertigo, whereas vestibular paroxysmia will have in any head position. So these are some of the differentiating features which are between BPPV and the vestibular paroxysmia. And also the vestibular paroxysmia, they respond to a particular medication such as what is called as carbamazepine. If I'm not wrong, they respond to this medicine well. That is when it is given, the vertigo subsides, whereas the cases with BPPV, they do not subside with any medication.
Okay, we have one more question by Mr. Pavan. As of now, he understands Meniere's disease is a unilateral pathology. I want to know what is the pathophysiology of Meniere's disease?
Meniere's disease is basically an autoimmune disorder, number one, and the pathophysiology is nothing but basically it is increase in the endolymph, the amount of fluid which is increasing, and when the amount of fluid is increasing, what will happen is it will basically cause a compression. It will cause a compression on the auditory structure or the vestibular structure which is there. And particularly if we look into the cochlear system, let us understand the cochlear system. We have the basilar membrane, and basilar membrane, what will happen is it is more stiff towards the basal side and it is lesser stiff towards the apical side. And because there is a pressure, what will happen is the apical portion of the basilar membrane will be more compressed compared to the basal side, and hence the hearing loss is going to be from the lower frequencies rather than the higher frequencies. Also, what will happen is when the amount of fluid is going to increase over the period of time, it is going to cause the rupture of the Regener's membrane, because it's a simple rule of physics that you can compress any system, you cannot compress the fluid. Hence, the fluid is going to compress everything. So there will be a fine day, there is going to be a rupture of the Regener's membrane, and when the Regener's membrane will rupture, the pressure which is inside the membranous labyrinth will suddenly release out, burst out, and because of which they will have this vertigo attack. And during the vertigo attack, what will happen is there will be a relief from the pressure. There will be relief from the pressure, and that's why the hearing will become better during the attacks, and also the tinnitus will become better. So it is basically because of the increase in endolymph which is causing a pressure inside the inner ear labyrinth. Hello.
Okay, I hope Pavan understood that. And we have one question from again Ms. Meenakshi Gupta. Have you come across patients with eustachian tube dysfunction experiencing vestibular symptoms?
This is I'll say no. I mean eustachian tube dysfunction having this one. But what will happen is this generally eustachian tube dysfunction will have a full blockage and they will report to me with headache rather than a vestibular dysfunction. But recently I saw 2 cases who had eustachian tube dysfunction, and they had traveled by flight to somewhere, and that station tube blockage was there, and when they have traveled, they have got a barotrauma. So post flight, immediately when they got down, when the flight landed, after within half an hour, they have got barotrauma, there is a lymphatic fistula to these cases. But as such, pure stretching tube and having a giddiness, I have not seen. Hello? Hello? Hello?
Okay, she has any study. She asked if there are any studies in this matter. Hello, you can hear me, Sujit?
I'm not sure. I'll have to check out. I'll have to check out. Yeah. I'll have to check out. I'm not sure about this.
Okay.
Hello.
Yes.
Sir, one
you
more
can hear.
question. One more question. If Meniere's is autoimmune disorder, it will lead to bilateral vestibulopathy later. Does it lead to that?
Around 30% of the cases with Meniere's disease will result in a bilateral Meniere's disease at a later point of time. Around 30% of the cases, not all the cases, but there is a phase in Meniere's disease which we have to understand, which is called as burnout Meniere's disease. Now, burnout Meniere's disease is nothing but after 8 years, 10 years after the onset of the disease, what will happen is there will be a continuous damage which will be happening to the vestibular hair cells, and after that, one fine day, there are no more remaining hair cells which are there in the vestibular system. This is called as a burnout Meniere's disease, and in the burnout Meniere's disease, this patient will become fine because they have some surviving hair cell which will cause the problem. They do not have any surviving hair cell. The compensation is going to take place, and with the VRT they will become all fine. So around 30% of the cases with Meniere's disease, they definitely have a bilateral representation.
Okay. I hope that answers Pavan. Any other questions, Imran? I don't have questions here.
I just wanted to understand, Dr. Sujit, like vestibular paroxysmia, like you were saying, is symptomatic of positional changes and dizziness and all. So, how would you differentiate it from, say, vertebrobasilar insufficiency?
This is a thing which is there now. Vertebrobasilar insufficiency is another thing wherein when I look into the vertebrobasilar insufficiency, they also will represent with the same thing. But what we have to understand is when we are looking into a case of VBI, basically we are looking into a case of basilar artery, and we have to understand is when they have a basilar artery insufficiency, the same basilar artery, the two component that is the ICA and the PICA, that is nothing but anterior inferior cerebellar artery and the posterior cerebellar artery, which are there, which are supplied to the cerebellar structure and which is also supplied to the inner ear. The anterior inferior cerebellar artery which is there, it's supplied to the inner ear, not the PICA, but the ICA is supplied to the inner ear. Now the same ICA is supplied also to the cerebellar structure. So when we say that when we are looking into a basilar artery syndrome or the problem with the basilar artery, we are also looking into a cerebellar signs, and we are also looking into some signs which are related to the peripheral system and some signs which are related to the central system, wherein the vestibular paroxysmia may not have so much of central signs which is so much evident. It's only that when they are moving their head down, particularly towards the gravity, they will have the problem. Otherwise, they do not experience anything.
So VBI will have more cerebellar
Yes.
symptoms, whereas
yes,
paroxysmia
will have.
you will have mostly
Will not have.
cerebral symptoms.
Yes, exactly. And because of the connection which we have to remember, basilar artery, the ICA and the PICA, the two blood supply, both are supplied to the cerebellar system, and the ICA is a branch of ICA is also supplied to the inner ear. So when we are looking, we have to look into that.
The other thing I wanted to understand from you, Dr. Sujit, is when you do the Dixolpine for cases that you suspect of BPPV. So say if the Dixolpike is found positive on the table, do you do the Eplees at the same time, or do you take a break
Same.
and then do the
What happens is when I'm doing Dixolpike, they will have 2 or 3 attacks of vertigo. So I just give some time for them to relax, basically. So give a gap of 10 minutes at the max, and after that I will do the Eplees in the same session itself. I will not prolong to the other session. So I do the Eplees maneuver for the posterior canal, or if it is a lateral canal problem, I'll do the Goffoni maneuver.
Okay. So you would take a break. You won't do it in the same sitting.
Same sitting only, a 10 minutes break in the same sitting only. I won't send the patient out of my clinics.
Okay. Okay. And this vestibulogram that you created, that was very interesting for me. I'm just wondering, like, how do you actually in the clinical setup, how do you go about interpreting from the, say, for example, I've marked the symptoms and all that, and with the permutation and combination. So I'm just thinking of suggesting, like, wouldn't it be worth it, like, from somebody like you who's got a lot of experience in vestibular disorders, to actually collate these permutations and combinations and actually suggest some possible diagnosis, like, you know, the WebMD or something like that does, and create a software or something like that to help clinicians to understand the possibilities. Like you're saying that, you know, sometimes there can be, you know, sort of clinical history can tell you a lot about whether you should proceed with the test or not, and such things. Like, what do you think? Do you think that is it worth sort of creating a software or something?
It is creating a software is a fine idea. It's not a problem, but at the end of the day, now if I'm looking at my vestibulogram also, 90% of my diagnosis I end up doing from this, and my subjective test which I do, I may or may not go for objective test. Like if I know that this case is definitely of a BPPV, then I may not go ahead with any of the vestibular test. I'll just take a history and I'll do the Dixolpike that way. But there can be that if we are looking into the cases, it can be done. There is no problem that it cannot be done. But at the end of the day, you must look into the patient personally. That is more important than anything else.
No, you are right. What I was suggesting was, like, you know, you are doing the vestibular gram. Say, for example, somebody's got one attack, or somebody's got a certain peripheral symptom, certain neurological sign, and based on what we enter into the software, or say in this vestibulogram, then it, with all the permutation and combination, maybe 4 or 5.
It can be done. It can be done. Such as, for example, if I look into my vestibulogram, the question case history itself, if I can mark from 1 to the last, that is giddiness to the history of this one, then probably I can arrive at a diagnosis. That is, if they fill in this, they can arrive at a diagnosis. That is not a problem. But it always has to be like query. That has to be at the end of the day, they have to clear it with the clinical correlation with the patient. But yes, query mean yes, query BPPV, query vestibular migraine, yes, I am yes for it.
Like,
that is fine.
With all the permutation combination, we can come and to say, okay, there are 4 possibilities, and then at least
that can be done. That can be
differentially diagnosed.
Yeah, that can be done. That can be done easily. That is not a problem. That can be done.
I mean, somebody can, you only, like you, or you know, who are involved into a vestibular system management and diagnosis for a long time, are the people who I would suggest would do it, you know, for all of us, benefit for all of us. I would sincerely to consider that.
That can be done. That is not a problem. That is not a problem. But it always, the diagnosis would be with a query that they have to confirm it clinically at the, table itself. That's what it is.
Like, you know, you four possibilities. Now you know, okay, what
it can be something like if you have this finding, probably you are dealing with a case of 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you clinically correlate. Yeah, that is okay. That is okay to do. That is okay to do. Is there any other questions?
Yeah, we have Miss Meenakshi Gupta saying, I had a patient last week, no central symptoms, left ICA 90% blocked. For long, the doctors kept diagnosing it as BPPV. Would vestibular assessment help here? Obviously.
Case with?
Sorry?
No, I didn't get the question.
I had a patient last week with no central symptoms, left
Okay.
ICA 90% blocked.
Left which artery?
ICA. Hello?
Left ICA. Huh. What is he
Okay.
meant by ICA? Can she expand the term?
Intracarotid artery, I think. Internal carotid
Internal
artery.
carotid. Okay. Okay.
For long, the doctors kept diagnosing it as BPPV. Would
Okay.
vestibular assessment help here?
No. No. I will not go ahead with the vestibular evaluations.
Why do you think so?
Carotid artery is something to deal with the medically rather than the blockage has to be cleared, whatever way it is. So it has to be dealt medically rather than a vestibular evaluation. I will not want to do it. I will send it to the doctors only first. Let them correct it to the management, and probably after the management is done medically, then I will look for whether there is a vestibular problem.
Okay. Meenakshi, are you here? Can you ask the question again? I think there's a confusion there. Yeah, she's here. Meenakshi?
Hello,
Yeah.
can you hear me? Yeah, so
Hi,
I think I should have, sorry, I should have framed my question better. So this patient has been coming to the doctors for 4-5 years, complaining of constant dizziness, and she's got bilateral moderate sensory neural hearing loss. She uses hearing aids. She's been seeing me. Doctor sent her to me, and I tried everything that I could, but her symptoms were getting worse and worse. And finally, I told her, I said, look, there's nothing more that I can do. Probably you should go back to your doctor and ask them to do some more investigations, because your symptoms are getting worse. That's an indication that something is not right. So anyway, she went, and this has been happening for like 4 to 5 years now. She went and the doctor said, oh, look, it is a BPPV. We know there's nothing wrong, but let's just do the, I think the Doppler test or something for the ICA.
Yeah.
And the reports came back with 90% blockage in the left ICA. And
Okay.
so that's the cause. But if we had done the vestibular assessment at some point before this Doppler test was done, could it have, if it had ruled out that there is no vestibular weakness or there's no BPPV or something like that, would that have helped the GPs to take this step
Yeah,
much before?
exactly. In these such cases, what will happen is when they are presenting with a kind of vertigo in the change of head position, it's wise to turn the head once and see that whether it is really related to the head position or it is atypical of a BPPV or not. And we have to understand is that, and we have to understand the three canals and whether the nystagmus which is coming or the vertigo which is coming, it's falling into BPPV category or not. Once we have this one, then probably it would have answered the, I mean, helped the GP much earlier. Yes.
So do we, as an audiologist, can we write in our reports, or are we authorized to write in our reports that we have, based on vestibular assessment, we have ruled out BPPV because no nystagmus was seen or blah, blah, blah. Can we do that?
Yes, I write it in my report. If I don't find it to be positive on my Dix-Hallpike test or the lateral the supine roll test, I write that no supine roll test negative, Dix-Hallpike test negative, which is suggestive of no benign proximal positional vertigo of posterior lateral or the anterior canal. I read that.
Okay, that answers the question. Yes. Can you go through that? Sorry.
Sorry, Dr. Sujit, in this case, the ICA is 90% blocked. So the question asked is that if we can rule out peripheral vestibular symptoms. So basically, if you want to rule out BPPV, you're going to do a Dix-Hallpike. You're going to turn the head of the person.
Dix-Hallpike.
You might compress the ICA on the other side, and you might have a patient in a syncope or something like that. Do you think you should take such a risk?
No. No. The thing is, what we have to understand is, yes, it is there. The ICA, we are dealing with the neck, and what we have to understand is, when I'm turning the head, I am only turning the head, not like a benign proximal positional vertigo. I'm not giving a sudden jerk. as I said that when I am starting with any case, I am starting very cautiously. I will just try to see whether with a simple head movement, what is that I am getting. So it's a pattern of something like a part of a head sec nystagmus slightly moved here and there, and I'm seeing that what it is causing, and then only I will go ahead with the test. So at once I will not turn the head all of a sudden, even if I am 90% sure that the case is of BPPV.
True. So you're saying you just
No,
screen
no.
it in a light manner, not
Just you
actually.
screen it in light manner. No, not actually, not actually. Even the BPPV cases, I am very cautious because BPPV, most of them are older population, aged above 60 years or aged above 70 years, who are coming after the BPPV, and their neck is something which you have to take care while doing the Dixhall pike or while doing the supine roll. If something happens, it is a big problem which is going to be there. For us, for audiologists, because we do not know what to do medically, how to treat that condition. That is where we
And
have to
that,
be
that
very
leads
careful.
to another question that we were discussing on the group, Dr. Sujit, that maybe audiologists should have basic life support training, especially if we are dealing into vestibular, management and diagnosis. Because what if the patient goes unconscious, syncope, something like that, and we should at least know basic CPR or life-saving skills, life support. What do you think?
I don't want to comment on this. I don't know. I have no opinion about this. But to be very frank, let me tell you, if there is no medical support, say that I am not getting a report from an ENT or I am not getting a report from neurologist, probably I will back out from the vestibular area and I will get into some audiology this one again. That is the thing. So I am, to be very frank, I am at least 60-70% dependent upon the medical professionals for to come to a final diagnosis of the case.
True. So it is more funneled, and you kind of know that yes, it is peripheral, and now it's your turn to sort of find out what the pathology is.
Yes, exactly.
But still, there is a chance that something can be missed by the physician, and then it end up on
And
your
yeah,
diagnostic table.
can be there, can be there, can be there, can be there. Definitely, it can be there. But I don't want to, I mean, comment into on this part because I do not know how feasible or how it is going to happen over the period of time. No idea.
Anybody else? Any other question? Here I can't see any other questions. Mr. Suresh is here. Suresh sir, are you here? If he's here, I thought he can close the comments.
No, Suresh sir is not here.
Okay. Imran, can you close it?
Okay. So I once again thank Dr. Sujit Kumar Sinha for an excellent overview of signs and symptoms of vestibular disorders. It is an excellent beginning to a beautiful journey that we are taking for understanding vestibular disorders and its management. This is just the beginning of our journey. There are still more exciting webinars to come. And I sincerely thank Dr. Sujit Kumar Sinha to accept our invitation. And I think we did not give him enough time to prepare as well. It was very hectic and everything, but he still accepted it without any hesitation. So I sincerely thank him. He's one of the most active members of our clinical audiology group as well. Please, sir, keep contributing. We all look forward to hearing from you, all your good feedback and all that. And very, very sincere thanks to Srividya ma'am as well. This time I could not contribute much into the organization of all this, but this is all whole and soul done by Srividya ma'am. She definitely deserves a lot of applause for this. She has coordinated, with all the presenters, and she's worked really hard to reach to what we are now. So she definitely deserves a lot of praise for it. Thank you so much, Dr. Sujit, and we will hope that we'll hear from you again.
Yeah, I would like to add. Yeah, I would like to add. I want Give my special thanks to Isha also, the Isha secretary, president, and all who gave us this platform first of all for broadcasting this. And time and again I keep interrupting them and asking for these dates, particular dates and schedule. They readily agree. Otherwise, this wouldn't have happened. We couldn't have got together and done this webinars. So special thanks to Isha.
And thank you, Srividya madam, and thank you, Imran, for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Sujit.
And
Thank you so much.
and this was my first webinar, and probably I was greedy too about it. Let me tell you very frankly. So when I got the
You did an
opportunity, I was
excellent
like, okay,
job,
let me
sir.
do it. Okay.
Good.
And that is where I was also. So thank you so much. Thank you for providing the opportunity. If there is no more question, I'll log out.
Thank you all the attendees. Thank you, and thank you, Imran. Thank you, Mr. Suresh also. Thank